Hello, I'm here with Elizabeth Fiorito. You are an English teacher in high school.
Yes.
And you found us through my wife's Instagram account.
Correct.
And then your students, you turned some of them on to Frankenstein when we were doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then then you and I chatted, and you suggested we should do Wuthering Heights.
Yes.
So you're responsible for all the fun we're having at the moment. And I wanted to ask you a few questions about Wuthering Heights. Now, why is it at the top of your list of favorite books? I don't know whether it's at the top of your list, but high on your list.
Well, I think, this certainly isn't an unusual suggestion. I mean, Wuthering Heights, one of the things about Wuthering Heights that makes it so eternal is that, here, I think Emily Brontë would actually kind of die a little if she knew that in 1841 she was going to publish a book that she was already a little bit wary about letting the public see. And then not only are we talking about it in high schools in 2020, we're now having Instagram chats over it in 2020. People are still basing their novels around her archetypes. And I don't know if she would be so elated. I'm sure the immortality would be wonderful, since she only was able to write one book because she died within a very short time period after it was published. But I think because this book is so raw and it doesn't apologize in any capacity, and it doesn't seek to make it nice, so to speak, I think a preacher's daughter who lived most of her life on a solitary existence of her own choosing, and had very little interaction with the outside world, I think she would just be mortified that people knew this about her. Because when we look at these characters, anyone can write a book about people exploring love. I mean, that's the theme of every song poem, but very few people ask themselves, what about people who are not nice? What about mean people? What about people who are not good? What happens when they fall in love? And she never gives us what we want, and what subsequently Hollywood has done, where it's one of the novels that's been made most into movies, series. I think second only to her sister's Jane Eyre by Charlotte. And every single adaptation, they change it. They can never be true to Cathy. They can never be true to Heathcliff. And most people, when you say, do you like Wuthering Heights? Oh, I love Wuthering Heights. But they've never finished the book, and they don't realize that she was not only setting up an impossible, complicated, messy, honest portrayal of two people who were not virtuous, who were not selfless. In fact, their love was incredibly selfish. The way she makes it nice is by resolving it in the end with the later generation, who shows the difference between selfish love, like we have with Cathy and Heathcliff, and selfless love. But most people don't even get to that. Hollywood just wants, they love the passion, but they can't be honest the way she was in 1841. They can't portray a truly, talk about ahead of its time. I mean, Cathy, as far as a masculine energy, what would have been considered masculine at the time for traits: independent, good with horses, a disappointment to her father for all of those reasons, having ambition, recognizing that she can't marry this guy. Number one, he's the stable boy. Number two, he might be her brother. There is no happy ending here. And she destroys herself over it. And instead of portraying that, all of her faults and levels there, they make her softer. They round her out. They temper her in these films. And I just think it's amazing. And Heathcliff too, they make him softer. They make him less of a monster. And much like in Frankenstein, we get the question of reliable narrators again. We're really going on Nellie, right?
Yeah.
And who knows if she's giving us the truth or not? And who knows if this isn't all just filtered through jealousy of Kathy?
Oh, that's
You know?
fascinating. Yeah.
I mean, as a young girl in the same household with a mysterious parentage who is treated like one of the household, she's almost at the same age. And that's the other thing Hollywood can't be honest about, that Emily Brontë was. They always portray Nellie as this older, wiser figure.
Right.
But she wasn't. She was a peer of Kathy's. Kathy's beautiful. Kathy's desired. Kathy is the eligible bachelorette.
Right.
And Nellie, and in a weird way, we also get this complication of Henley and Nellie. Kind of, it's not Nellie's story, so she's never going to give us the goods, but every once in a while, she will insert something that lets us know, wait a minute.
Wow.
There's a whole story going on underneath here between Nellie and Henley, Nellie and Kathy, Nellie and Heathcliff. And one of the other last brilliant things I will say about Emily Brontë is this. Most writers are afraid to alienate an audience with their characters.
Mm-hmm.
Not Emily Brontë. She really, as soon as you think you know how you feel about a character, she goes, wait a minute, let me put this new spin on it. So later in the novel, we're going to have a character, Linton Heathcliff. And at first you feel so badly for this kid for lots of reasons. And then just when you are at your oh, this poor pathetic kid, she spins it and says, aha, wait a minute, you didn't know this about this guy. And then you hate him. You hate him more than you've hated anyone. And then she spins it again. And then you feel terrible. I've rarely read anybody who speaks so truthfully, so honestly, doesn't apologize. And I think that passion and that like just throwing it all out there. Well, I think number one, it's the reason she didn't really want it to be published. And number two, why it keeps going on and on and on.
I was going to ask, I mean, you think it's the honesty, because it is sort of, I was trying to think along with, Romeo and Juliet, maybe Cleopatra, Samson and Delilah. It's the archetypal love affair, though they are both so horrible. So it's strange that we think of that. And you think it's the honesty that she writes about it? I
think it's because it's the honesty, and I think also it's the passion. Like Kathy and Heathcliff don't have any boundaries. As far as romance goes, they don't have any boundaries. They're, you said you're in chapter 5. Well, they're running around. They're going to be running around in chapter 6 and 7. And she's so good about the censors. Like, you have to really look through those lines, but Nellie's very concerned about them not coming home at night. She's very concerned about them out there on the moors. What do we think they're doing out there on the moors? And it's just, so when she suddenly, and as savages that are not chaperoned in any way. I think people really tap into this, like, I want to be free. I want somebody to love me in a fierce, and this is concerning, but as far as Heathcliff goes, kind of a violent way. I want somebody to be destroyed if they can't be with me. The speeches they give, they're so vehement and absolute, and they won't let each other go. And I think people kind of take that part,
right,
and they miss the overall message. The other thing is Heathcliff is such the archetypical Byronic hero, and the reason that is so important for this novel is that almost every Gothic hero that comes after, Gothic romantic hero, I mean, it comes from Byron, but it really comes from this exploration with Emily Brontë, with Heathcliff. I mean, him screaming in the fields with the trees, Kathy, haunt me then. If I killed you, haunt me then. Just don't leave me in this abyss where I cannot find you. Like, it's this complete isolated person, you know, all of this we have, you know, he's a loner. He is implacable in revenge. He is devastatingly attractive, right? And that has been, you know, mirrored. I mean, how could you ever count how many times people have replicated the best parts of Heathcliff?
Right.
Not the parts where he beats his wife and stuff, but those parts, you know.
That is fascinating. So tell us a little bit about the Brontë sisters. How did it happen that these two sisters wrote these? Was Charlotte, Emily,
Anne, and Emily.
And what did Anne write?
Anne wrote The Tenant at Wildfell Hall, which, interestingly, here's something interesting about the Brontë sisters too. They had a brother named Branwell, and Branwell should have been a lot of things. He was the one son. He should have married well, lifted them up, provided for them. He was artistic. He was genius. He was all of these things. Instead, what did he do? He went to ruin with addiction and depression, and the girls had to take care of him, and he dies. And it's interesting because in every Brontë book, whether it's Emily's, because Emily's was first published, Wuthering Heights, then Charlotte's Jane Eyre, and then Anne's subsequent publications, I think the best of which is Tenant at Wildfell Hall, they all have a Bramwell, Heathcliff, Mr. Rochester, and so on character. And they all have different perspectives of this character. You know, Heathcliff is presented in all of his ruinous glory, right? The things that make him amazing and captivating and compelling and we can't turn away, but also all of the things that destroy everyone around him because he's willing to take everybody down with him. Then we get Mr. Rochester and Jane Eyre, who he's done naughty things in his life, and he has done things that he needs to pay for. But as long as he pays for them with the burning down of the mansion and, you know, losing his sight and, you know, very biblical, you know, if the right eye offend you, cast it out, this whole thing. As long as he pays for his sins, then he is the ultimate example of manhood. In Tenant at Wildfell Hall, we get a totally different perspective by Anne, who was not, whereas Emily was very gothic, romantic, honest, but also this is a ghost story. You know, we've got ghost elements. We've got this whole gothic horror thing. And then Jane is very romantical in what I would call modern romance. You know, I'm a governess and I fall in love with the guy who works there and we have some troubles and it works out. Anne was looking at the same character with no rose-colored glasses. Her character marries. It's kind of like what we never see what happens when you marry this love of your life, who's this character. She does, and he is an absolute monster. And it's a critique on Victorian marriage and the rules that you engage in, you know, the rights that women lose when you marry. It doesn't matter what he's doing. You have to take it. And this book was so explosive that it sold out immediately.
Wow.
But Anne was already dead when it started to go gangbusters because it was so taboo. Charlotte being the only sister who was still alive because they died in such quick succession. Charlotte decided not to have or said no to letting them publish Anne's book because she wanted to keep a good reputation for her sisters. And you could also argue she really wanted to be the favorite. And she kind of squelched her sister's reputation until much later when it was rediscovered.
Wow. So that gives us not one, but 3 books to read on Fireside Reading.
Oh, yeah.
And to see
Tenant at Wildfell Hall is crazy.
Wow. I haven't read that. So I'm excited by that. That is great.
Yeah.
Now you teach Wuthering Heights to your high schoolers.
Yes.
And do they like it?
Yes. I mean, they love it, but as we're very careful to make sure we point out the subtleties so that we don't, this is as much of an expose of the love of our Byronic hero as much as it's a criticism of it too. So they, as soon as they're like in love with Kathy or Heathcliff or one of these characters, immediately she turns the table. So they're very frustrated with it, as they should be.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They love, they have very polarizing effects to it, but I think the point of good literature is that it makes you think and it makes you feel. And they absolutely are obsessed with it while we're doing it. And that's the telltale sign of a classic novel.
Wow. Well, I think that is a very fine place to end it. It makes you think and it makes you feel. And I am so grateful for you for sharing with us your thoughts, which are amazingly insightful. And I'd love to chat with you again if you would be available as we finish up the book, and you can tell us, what we might have missed. I mean, I certainly have always missed the Nellie jealousy part. And so I suppose there's going to be a lot of that. Now, as I read it through, I'm going to have my eye on that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. As you read, pay attention to the details and the criticisms that Nellie has. Remember, we're only getting the conversation from Nellie.
Yeah. Very good.
Absolutely. I would love to. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. It's so kind of you. And you have some very lucky students, I can tell, because your passion for this stuff is palpable. And I really appreciate you talking to me and to all of the Fireside Reading.
Thank you very much. It's a wonderful channel.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Goodbye.
Bye.